Senran Kagura Burst Renewal is a remake of Senran Kagura Burst, which in turn was an updated re-release of the first Senran Kagura, where they added the Hebijo school as playable characters. But unlike those games, this has been remade into the 3D action hack and slash the series has been more widely known for since the release of Shinobi Versus on the PS Vita. Now, if I'm quite honest, this isn't a bad game, but if you have played the previous main entry Estival Versus, then this game is a bit of a waste of time and is quite shameless on how much of it is reused from the previous game, which came out 4 years ago. Just so we get on the same page, how much new content there is in this game is 2 stages and 1 boss fight, and as well as having over half the cast removed, because apparently if you have a story which is set before the previous games, it means cutting everybody else out and re-releasing them as DLC is apparently more acceptable for this fan base than, adding separate stories for them. But, I digress. Just as a side note, whilst I was editing this, I did actually have quite a lot of fun replaying the game. Yeah, I know, it's very strange for that. There is still, the base level of fun to be had in this game. And it's not actually as bad as I remember it being from, all these notes I had from a couple of months ago. But yeah, I would suggest getting this game on sale, or if you're a new person getting into the series, I would highly recommend this game. However, I cannot recommend it at full price, or for the die-hard fans that are looking for something new, because there really isn't. But yeah, it is still, very fun. So let's go over what is good and what was added. The story is actually really good, and probably the only reason to actually buy this game. It's more in-depth than something like Shinobi Versus, because that game was split into schools. Here, the game is also split into schools. However, there's 45 to 47 stages for the 2 schools, those being Hanzo and Hebijo School, which later become the Crimson Squad. So it is much more in-depth, with the same style of telling the story of the characters looking around at each other, or there's just walls of text and all that stuff. It has its moments, it has funny moments, it has sad moments, has happy moments, all stuff like that. So the game also does have better graphics, is a lot more refined than something like Estival Versus. It's really nice to look at, and one of the features of the new graphics is the attack indicators, which are yellow and orangey colours for normal attacks, which can come from any direction, and purple for unblockable attacks, so it's this nice colour-coded system. It would have been nice if the hard difficulties removed it, so the game would be a bit more of a challenge, as opposed to the way they've actually implemented hard mode in this game. As well as that, some new attacks have been added to the game, with Katsuragi having now a ranged attack for her strong breach art. Ikaruga as well does benefit from some new attacks. So from what I've played as well, the Crimson Squad, however, don't get any new attacks. I'm not really a fan of the Crimson Squads, so somebody who enjoys playing those characters might be able to tell if there is a difference, but from what I've played, I don't think they are. There is a new mechanic, which is burst mode, which you cause sort of a ball of energy to appear, and if you've been using your Shinobi transformation, you actually revert to your normal moves whilst using this, which is, quite nice, and when the gauge goes down, there's sort of like an energy explosion. If you manage to use that as a finishing move on an enemy Shinobi, or, an actual playable character, it comes up with this nice scene where you sort of strip them, which is reminiscent of the combined aerial raves from Estival Versus. Everybody gets a new transformation, including all the DLC characters, which is, quite nice as well. You can now tan and change characters' skin colours, which is the only new feature for the dressing room mode. So that is the main new features of this game. It's not a lot, if I'm quite honest. There's a few smaller details, like being able to press X whilst in the air and you go straight to the ground, which comes as an upgrade later in the game, as well as several things like Yumi now blocks with her ice sword when she's using her ultimate ninpo, and other stuff like that. But let's go over the bad stuff, because there is a heck of a lot. So no multiplayer, which I'm just gonna have to restate, because that is just unbelievable. No multiplayer, even though it reuses 95% of its assets from Estival Versus. and 95% is me being generous to this game, I should mention. There is no multiplayer, mainly because, well, I can assume it's because they cut out half the characters and, you know, that would just annoy people, as opposed to just putting them in the game and then having them as characters for, you know, the free modes or the training modes or whatever, or just, you know, you could have had Shinobi Girls Hearts where, you know, they sort of travel back in time and do whatever they do and all stuff like that. So the old stage structure as well is pretty bad in this game. It's unlike Estral Versus in that sense. Nearly every stage in this game is either a one-on-one fight or just versus a bunch of, you know, the generic enemies which aren't really a challenge. You go through them like a hot knife goes through butter. There are a few instances where the game is a bit like Estral Versus, but there's so few enemies, you know, as soon as you've defeated like 15 generics, you're there at the boss fight. It's very, very disappointing. So I should mention the rebalancing of the game as well in those regards. So for some reason they've decided that every major character now needs 4 life bars to fight, making the one-on-one fights extremely grindy. I'm not sure if that's because they removed the multiple fights in this game compared to Estral Versus, which, you know, there was stages in Estral Versus where, say, the first instance where you play as Jasmine, we fight the whole of the Hanzo squad by yourself. You know, you fight Kat and Akariga first and then the other 3 later on. There's no instances of that at all in this game, not even in the free mode. There is a stage where you fight the Hanzo school, but you fight them one-on-one. Just the variety of, you know, the games have just gone. It's, you know, pretty sad. And, you know, there are actually enemies in this game which are like hidden, more powered up generic enemies, like, you know, the bear, the tortoise, the bird, and all stuff like that. There's more powered up versions of those. You could have had them as like end level bosses, so it'd be more in line with Estral Versus, and, you know, would have made the stages, you know, a bit more enjoyable. But they are hidden throughout stages. They're not even like end level bosses or anything like that. It's, you know, kind of disappointing in that sense. So going with the story as well, because there's so much story in between each stage and then the stages are so short, it's just very, very disappointing. You get all this story, which is, you know, really well written and all that, and you go into the stage and it's over in seconds. It's just all this build up for absolutely fucking nothing. It's just a joke. So the characters are more grindy to fight, which can't really say I enjoyed it that much. So one of the things that was removed is the creative finishers. You know, the things where if you defeated an enemy near, you know, the little posts sticking out the ground with the exclamation mark on it, if you did that, you get a funny scene, like, you know, an octopus groping the girl's boobs, or them exploding in the air because they landed on a platform or something like that. Yeah, they decided to remove all of those. So yeah, a step back even in the lewd department, which is, I know this game is a prequel, but do you really have to be a prequel to all the fucking fun as well? That's a genuine question. I want to know what they were thinking when they made this game. With that in mind, sort of humour has sort of gone out the window as well. The charm of the series. So stuff like Shinobi Girls Hearts in the previous game, with Asuka's body being controlled by Hanzo, and then they get into situations where she like gropes all the other characters, and then she has to pay for it when Hanzo decides to leave. So, you know, comical stuff like that, or, you know, Murakumo putting her pussy juice stained panties over her face because she's afraid of showing her face to anybody. Sorry, that was a bit rude. I mean, holy water stained panties. You know, stuff like that where, you know, Homura wants to be a stand-up comedian or whatever. Just, you know, really light-hearted stuff like that. This game tries a bit too hard to be serious. And this is coming from a series which playing for the story is a meme. And literally that is the only thing that's keeping people sort of grounded to this game. It's just a joke. There's just not enough sort of content to warrant buying this game, if I'm perfectly honest. Yeah, the removal of Shinobi Girls Hearts missions, which, you know, I can kind of understand because they would be a bit overdone, but then those were good for showing other sides of the characters which you wouldn't see throughout the story, because that's, you know, a bit more serious. So intimacy mode as well on the Western PS4 version, because Sony are cunts and don't actually understand what a fucking joke is, or, you know, can't tell the difference between reality and a fucking video game. I honestly don't get why they are so, you know, fucking anal about all stuff like this. I mean, even in games which the characters' ages which are hidden, I mean, I'm pretty sure there's no instances in this game which the characters' ages are, you know, specifically said. And the characters are so cartoonish and unrealistic. I mean, how far do you have to take it for people to realise this isn't like reality? I mean, if you actually went up to most people in the street and started groping them, you would be fucking knocked out. I mean, in this game and in this series, it is so overdone, the reactions of the characters, that anybody thinking it was serious probably needs a fucking lobotomy. So if you buy this game on the PS4, you're missing out on a large chunk of the game. You know, a comical mode which you molest, you know, fucking blatant cartoon characters. It's a bit of a fucking joke. So the dressing room is actually a step back from Peach Beach Splash. The underwear system in Peach Beach Splash, you could pick, you know, your panty type or whatever, and then you get to pick your design. For some reason, they've gone back to this really, really long and stupid fucking list thing, which it doesn't even let you have the option of when you hover over the thing, it changes on the character and then you can select it. No, it has you have to select the option to look at it, and then if you don't like it, you have to go and reselect the previous one. Like, who the fuck thinks these are good ideas? I mean, it's honestly, I still cannot comprehend why somebody thought that was a good fucking idea. The system they put in Peach Beach Splash was really good, because you know, you get to pick your design and then all the different, you know, patterns and stuff. And some of them were really cool. They're ones we hadn't had before, but, you know, they had to get removed because, you know, just, yeah, I honestly don't get this select and then having to reselect the previous thing. Just fuck off. Like, why? Like, this game doesn't even take the smallest good changes from Peach Beach Splash. And yes, I'm literally doing a rant about how selecting underwear in a fucking video game is difficult, but like, why is this a thing? No player convenience at all. And the whole thing about this series is the customization of the characters as well, and they don't make it easy. Like, I'm surprised they still haven't gone, you know, the whole Sims 3 route of just, you know, you can select any hair color and any pattern for, you know, just any material. That can't be out of their reach. I mean, the game is so poorly optimized. If you select between 2 or 3 different hair colours, not even styles, colours, the game has to reload the fucking textures. I mean, how the fuck are you this incompetent? I mean, fucking hell. Yeah, speaking about cut content, there's only 12 characters now. I should mention the two of the characters, Rin and Daidoji, don't actually have anything to do with the story. People are always defending, oh, then they weren't in the story at this point, all the characters weren't in the story at this point, yet they were happy, Marvelous, that is, were happy to resell 2 of the characters as paid DLC with their own stories, as opposed to, you know, making stories for, you know, Gessen and Hebijo schools, which, you know, you could have had a whole storyline with Gessen going through their training under Master Kurakage, something which hasn't really been explored other than in flashbacks in the games. You know, you could have actually had that, which would have fit in quite well, as opposed to, you know, Yumi going around beating up characters which don't appear for another, nearly 4 years in the story, I think it is, or something. Yeah, so Yumi actually fights Naruko in her story, although despite not even knowing who that is, or Mayabi fighting Kagura, although they've never met before until, you know, PBS. So yeah, so that doesn't really make sense. Like, that's the thing, they were happy enough to sell them off as DLC instead of actually adding something which would have brought older players back into this game, instead of just, you know, re-releasing what most people are considering the same game the 3rd time. I mean, this game has such little content, it might as well be an expansion, or it could have been patched in for fuck's sake. There's patches for Girls und Panzer Dream Tank Match, which add more content to that game in a free patch than this does as a full fucking release. Just think about that for a fucking second. Honestly, it's a fucking joke. So I should mention, going on about lack of content, only 2 new stages, both of which are the last stage of each story. All the other stages are from Shinobi Versus or Estival Versus. So the Shinobi Versus ones we actually have had a bit of a break from for a couple of years. I think Shinobi Versus came out in 2013, so 6-year gap to replay some old stages. Isn't that lovely? Should mention that also with the removal of characters, there's actually less options to pick with the dressing room customizations. That's something I've just remembered, because I used to play as Murasaki with Kafuru's haircut, but one of those characters isn't in the game, so I can't do that. Yeah, so the dressing room has basically 0 improvements. I know this game is a prequel, but fucking hell, I never understood that argument. It's it's a prequel, so fucking cunting well what? If Dynasty Warriors can retell the same story over and over again and not get away with poor design choices, then neither should this fucking series, if I'm quite honest. Let's also remember they can update these things, and it's not like, I'm not sure how to say it. They used to be really for the fans marvellous. I mean, the Neptune DLC for PBS was nearly like 9 months into that game's life, and as well as Estival Versus get the Ikitosen DLC nearly a year later for the Western fans. I mean, that was stuff that was like really good pro-consumer, and just this, a fucking shitty cash grab made of 95% reused fucking assets. Fucking God knows what went wrong there. I mean, if they just found a fan base to exploit and just done it, because, if so, then quite a lot of us should just fuck off, I think. So, probably my biggest gripe with this game is unlocking of the moves for the characters, which is linked now to the yin and yang system, with quite a few characters unlocking their final moves on rank 5. Now, if anybody's played Estival Versus or Shinobi Versus, you will know how difficult or how grindy it is to reach the final level of the yin and yang system. So you could be playing the same stage for 20 times, I want to say, because there's so few enemies in these stages. Maybe a few more. It's also dependent on your combo count and stuff like that. So yeah, which is pretty stupid, considering the combat is very basic to begin with, and unlocking the moves via the level system was quite nice in Estival Versus. It gave you a bit of time to get familiar with the character when they're lower leveled, and then it gave sort of a good progression when you level up the character sufficiently to get the ending moves. With the combat system, it's very basic, but there is some slight complexion to it. However, with the move system, unlocking your final moves and actually using them, because of the staggering system in this game, there's very few chances you will actually get to use the moves unless you sort of try and execute your combo before you get in range of enemies and all stuff like that. I really have no idea what I'm going on about now, but I just want to say the progression system in this game I honestly don't know what they were thinking. I think it's actually done so people continue to play the game for longer. However, for the DLC characters and all stuff like that, they are unchanged from Estival Versus, other than the new transformation sequence. So yeah, I don't really have much else to say. I don't want to keep this video too long. If I'm honest, if you're a new person coming into this series, yes, this is a good game to start with. It's like Estival Versus, but with lesser characters, so you'll be less bothered by it. However, if you're a long-term fan, if you've been playing since the 3DS games, basically no reason to buy this at all. It is literally Estival Versus with more refined graphics, removed multiplayer, fucking 15 characters cut out, for reasons, yeah, it's a bit of a joke. People are saying, oh yeah, it's a you know, a well worth, you know, remake of the 3DS games, but then I think I didn't really play them, and I still don't think this is worth it. I'm not sure where those people are coming from, because surely the one thing you want to get from this game is the story, which you would have already known if you've played the 3DS games. And let's face it, the story is a meme. Oh, I play this game for the story or for the plot. That's a meme, and yet that's the one thing people seem to hold on to when defending this game. Okay, you can have fun with it, yeah, it's the same as Estival Versus though, which I'd highly recommend over this. There's more variety in Estival Versus as well, with the multiple boss fights and all stuff like that, and stages where you actually have a co-op companion with you. And, you know, that actually has multiplayer with 2 different varieties. You know, you have the, you know, PvP, or you have, you know, the boss wave mode and all stuff like that. It's like, I would even recommend Senran Kagura Bon Appetit over this game. At least that knows when it's meant to be funny. But, like, I have no idea what they were thinking with this game. It just going, you know, so serious for a game which has such a comical and anime-esque art style. And the whole thing is, like, their producer being tits are life, ass is hometown, and all stuff like that. And then you go and pull this fucking nonsense. So, yeah, I don't really know what else to say about this game. Yeah, this is a bit of shorter, unscripted review, but I don't really think there's much else to say about this game that's just, you know, there's nothing in this game that's really new, if you know what I mean. Yeah, let me know what you thought about this game. Honestly, I thought it was pretty disappointing. Although that being said, I would rather play this game than Dynasty Warriors 9, which, you know, is the biggest practical joke in gaming history, I will say. And I'm pretty sure anybody that defends that game has come out of a mental institute. At least this game is fun, because it is basically the same as the previous game.